it's been comforting to me to see because I really want my second quote unquote serious collection to be called Huh? I really, in my heart, that's what I want it to be called.
I love it. I
And
love it.
and I'm like, I need people to understand that I do mean the things in the book, even though I have this kind of joking title. It fits in, I promise. But it really was me going, I would love for my bio to be like D. Soul Carson, author of Huh?
Wait, does it have a question mark? Question mark?
It's question mark, exclamation, question mark, exclamation. That's
Wait. Black. The more you add on, the blacker it gets.
yeah.
Amazing.
Hello, poets of the internet. I'm Diesel Carson, and this is Eponymous, an O-word podcast series interested in poets, the title poems of their collections, and how their work finds its way into our hands. Today's episode is on YEET by Jason B. Crawford. Jason B. Crawford, he, they, born in Washington, D.C. and raised in Lansing, Michigan, is the author of Year of the Unicorn Kid. Their second collection, YEET, is the winner of the Omnidon First Second Book Prize and was published fall 2025. At the time of this recording, it was also a finalist for the 2026 Lammy Awards from Lambda Literary. They have been published in Poetry Magazine, Academy of American Poets, Cincinnati Review, Beloit Poetry Journal, and Rhino Poetry, among others. They are a 2023 Emerging Writers Fellow for Lambda Literary and hold their MFA in Poetry from the New School. Jason, hello.
Hello, D-Soul.
It's so nice to have you on here.
It's so nice to be here. It's so nice to be seen virtually and in your ears. Thanks for having me.
I've been super excited about this collection. I was super excited reading it. I used it in one of my classes recently, talking about, I think for your book specifically, we were thinking about the line and also the construction of the book. So I guess to start with the title, which is this popular slang term that means a couple of different things depending on the context. It can mean throwing something super hard. It has been an exclamation of surprise or joy or many other things depending on where you've encountered YEET. But what does YEET mean to you in the context of this collection?
I think, and I've been mulling this idea over even when I shopped this question or shopped this title and asked if it was the correct title. I've been asking myself, what does YEET mean? And for me, truly, I think it means a survival. And I think because I'm talking about so much Black language or the excavation / preservation of Black language within the book, along with this Afrofuturistic fairy tale of leaving Earth and finding safe space, we have to keep some language to ourselves. And for those that don't know what YEET comes from, or at least the first time I ever heard it, it was in the 2014 Vine where the girl literally throws a can and says, "This bitch empty." And like, that was like, it was a joke at first. I was like, I'm gonna call the book YEET. And I would say, "Oh, this bitch empty, YEET," because the book is empty. I have none. Right. And then but it made sense. It really did make sense that it was a book talking about, because YEET itself has been taken and misrepresented and repurposed by white culture and by white tongue. And this is a reclaiming of that as well.
When you were shopping the book around, as poets do with collections, were you afraid that because of the title, it wouldn't be taken seriously at all?
Absolutely. I was like, to know me is to know I should not be taken seriously half the time. Right? When I got the Lammy nomination, I literally posted me twerking to the Lammy nomination. But also, yeah, I think there is a little fear that we're already talking about Black language and Black survival and then Black joy, which are often things that are not packaged well together and want to be sold. And I was like, damn, I'm gonna do that and use a quote unquote joke title. What does that look like? What does that mean? But my publishers loved it. They said, "Fuck, don't keep that." Keep that.
I'm glad.
Yeah.
I'm glad. It's very similar to the conversation I feel like I was having with Taylor about her book Resting Bitch Face, because she said a very similar thing. Like, she was worried about Once you're swinging your publisher, like if this was the right title, and the publisher was like, yeah, this is the title, keep that. And so it's always really nice to hear when editors are affirming of that, of your vision for the book, whether or not we're afraid it'll be taken seriously or not. The description of the book describes it as Afro-futurist poetry that envisions Black people finding new worlds of freedom. And you've also spoken on this a little bit already. But how do you feel that you go about exploring ideas of freedom in this book? And what questions or discoveries reveal themselves to you in the process of that exploration? And even how long were you working on this collection?
Let's start with that part. This was my thesis. So I started it in 2020, fall of 2021, and it was done spring of 2023 when I submitted
Oh
the.
wow.
So 2
So a
years.
tight 2 years.
Yeah, a tight 2 years. And actually, everything but I think maybe 2 poems in the entire collection was written in that 2 years. I believe This Is Not I know for a fact This Is Not America was not written in that time frame because it came out a little bit before. I wrote that after Name, Time, Cop, Kill a Black Person, right? But I wrote that right before I moved to New York, and then I submitted it, got published, whatever, who cares? Then I know that the first of the series, which is the When I Finally Leave New York series, was written the day I was moving into my apartment here
Okay.
because I was so tired of moving things. I was like, I'm gonna burn all this shit. And then it became a poem about thinking about moving and leaving. So those two were outside of that. Everything else was during. With that being said, I did not know when I started my MFA that I wanted to write a book about exploration of new land. I didn't know I wanted to find a space for Black people to be free. I just know, again, I'm sure something happened at some point at some time during my first semester, and I was writing these poems. The first poem that I wrote, my first ever poem for grad school, was the first poem in the book when we finally
Okay.
got there. And I realized as I started, every week I'd write a poem to turn in, and every week I was like, oh, this poem is talking about Black people finding safety, finding freedom. And it's so different than my first book. And my first book is all about queer safety, and also how there are no safe spaces for queer people. And this one, I said, no, I'm going to find it for the Black people. So I think that's how I was thinking the entire time I was writing was, I have to find this place. I have to find this place. It has to happen. So, yeah.
Mm. When We Finally Get There is one of my favorite poems in the book, so it's very helpful that it's also the first poem. I think it's a really great. When I was talking about your book in the class, something that we were talking about is sequencing. So how does a poet go about deciding how the book leads us through the journey of its project or whatever? Your book was a little bit more, I think, easier for them to grasp because it had a clear-ish distinction between, like, in the story, like the narrative of the book of Black people leaving, finding a safe place to land, right? So there being two sections, arrival and departure. But we were really interested in the visual effect that first poem was having when we finally get there, and that like literal fading out
Mm.
of the text as we go through these kind of three sections of it. It was very clear from the jump, like this book is asking us to not just imagine new worlds for ourselves for Black people, but also imagine new ways of getting to those kinds of worlds, right? So new ways of looking at the poetry, looking at what text on the page can do. There's a similar effect that happens throughout the poems that I think I probably will touch on later with either fading out effects or stacking and things like that. So there's these kind of visual textual clues that we have for this idea of exploration or repetition or even exhaustion that the book touches on. So the title, YEET, manifests in the collection via a series of poems that are all titled Essay on YEET that reoccur across the book. How do you feel approaching that term from so many different angles, and how did that re-engagement help to transform the word for you, if at all?
I think that the idea of the essay in itself was me looking to talk to other authors. I also wanted to the book was also positioned in my mind saying, what if we all left? Sure, but now let's push it 500 years in the future. So now we're
Mhm.
actually talking about history lessons. That's how we got
Mhm.
history of the ark and history of the other history. History,
History of leaving, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's how we got those. And then the essay is technically supposed to be as if students were writing essays in classes. That poem itself is a student's work, is writing essays for someone. And I think it allowed for me, like Yeet is this manifested planet or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be the planet. Like I'm not saying it is. It's not.
I like to imagine it as the name of the ship. Like
Oh yeah,
we're on the Yeet.
yeah. We're on the SS Yeet, Yeet to Control Center. But yeah, but yeah. So it's like, or that, like, so it's like us trying to engage with this history and write about it. And how do we write about it other than in an essay form?
There's this interesting parallel to me, and it may or may not be intentional, but as I'm thinking about now the SS Yeet, I'm thinking about the Black Star Line.
Mm,
So Marcus Garvey trying to facilitate trade, trying to get Black people back to Africa, which in itself is sparked by the idea that Black people are not safe here on the American continent for many probably obvious reasons. And so trying to find a safe place for Black people in that regard. Um, I also just saw a movie called Black News Terms and Conditions, and it was basically a movie, but it presents itself as like an album, and it's like think outside of kind of narrative constraints and engage with the media as an album or a poetic text. So something that's a little bit less worried about a narrative experience and more worried about a somatic experience. And so just thinking about these kind of like recurring ideas of Black people wanting to find safety somewhere and then what that looks like and what does it mean to move a whole group of us. There's also, of course, Danez Smith's poem "Dear White America," which
yeah.
I think has another kind of similar conceit, right? And so this is another thing that comes up over and over for us. Um,
Can
something that, yeah, go ahead.
can I just say that speaking of Dinez, I believe that one of the things I truly was aiming towards is Summer Somewhere, which is a
Hmm.
huge 20 something page poem. It has shaped a lot of my written career. And I think subconsciously I was thinking when I started this process between reading Evel Ewing's Electric Arches and for it's the Arrival Day was the first poem in her book. And so reading
Okay.
that poem and then thinking about Summer Somewhere, those two are like they cross pollinate into the book. So
Yeah, yeah, I can feel that when I'm reading through the text, and it feels they're all in conversation, which I think this book is really trying to engage with, especially if we're thinking about essays, right? Those are their own kind of conversations, but this book feels very in conversation with a lot of Black poetics and a lot of Black thought in general about how do we find safety and what does that look like. All the essay on Yeet poems are after poems, which for listeners who are not aware, are poems that take inspiration from a direct source. Some of these afters in this book in particular are given different kinds of names, right? So we have, for example, The Invisible City after Italo Calvino, or A Conjuring after Dior J. Stevens. What did it mean for you to be in conversation with these different sources in the collection's title pieces? And can you also speak on the different ways that you went about framing them? Because I was really interested in that aspect specifically.
absolutely, absolutely. I believe that my words aren't really my words. It is whatever comes to me when it comes to me. I will always tell people this every single time. I am not as smart as my poems. My poems know better than me, and it's just true. I'm writing what the poem wants written. I would read a poem or read a book really, and then I would have an idea of what a poem should be for Yeet, and I would write that poem. And then I would have to reckon with the fact that I wrote this poem after reading Zan Phillips. Right. There's no other way to say it. I read Zan, I wrote the book, I wrote the poem, right? I read Douglas Kearney, which is one of my favorite poets of all time, and then I wrote the poem. And if you look at the Douglas Kearney one, it looks like a Douglas Kearney ass poem. It's funny because the Calvino one is the only one not accredited to a Black poet.
Mm,
Only one. And that's because I wrote that one specifically in a class where we read The Invisible Cities and we had to write something towards it. And I wrote a poem.
okay.
But outside of that, all the other ones, I was like, I'm reading Black poets for the reason of this book. So I need to make sure I'm attributing them in there. The framing, a lot of them are different because I believe they're asking for a different thing. Like The
Mm,
Conjuring with Dior, it was truly a spiritual conjuring of a new world with no bullets, with no guns.
mm,
Whereas the other ones, like the roadmap is clearly like a destination point. The archival is us trying to talk about the past. The one after Hanif has nothing, right? So it's literally
right.
it's a noticing. That's
Mhm.
how we got to all these different ones. Yeah, frame it in a way that made sense to what I'm asking the poem to do.
Yeah, it definitely was helpful for me as a reader to have the different cues as to what you or what the speaker, since poets never like to place themselves as the writer of the book. Side note, I always think that's really funny. Like, we just can't say that it's us. That Venn diagram is a circle, okay? Like, the speaker is you. It's
It is.
you.
That Venn diagram is a dot. What do you mean?
But yeah, I appreciated it because it made it very clear to me this is how I should be managing my engagement with the poem. It's not even necessarily that anything would have been lost, but I think people sometimes forget what can be done with kind of paratextual clues, right? So when we put things in the afters, the subtitles of the poems, or when we put things in the notes of a book, like we're allowed to engage with the audience outside of the poem on the page. And I think sometimes we feel a little bit sacred about that. The poem is the poem, and it's yes, the poem's the poem, but the poem is also the thing that informed the poem, right? And so I appreciate the poems in this collection pointing at the things that they were born of, because just once again it helps us to lead back into that conversation and make such a much more rich poetic landscape when we can say these things did not happen in a vacuum. For those who have not read the collection yet, they may not know that this book is landscape, which I think surprised me the first time you showed me the book in person. And it's a small but like surprising physical aspect of the collection. Like when you're reading it, you have to hold it a different way than you would most books that you're reading. And so part of me was just wondering, why did you choose to have the book set this way? And did it hold any specific significance towards the project aim?
Absolutely. As I tell my students all the time, there is nothing in a poem that does not matter. That's actually something I truly do say. You cannot leave anything to chance. The space on the page, the way it's set, the spaces in between, all of that need to be doing something, holding its weight, right? So when I was writing the book, I wrote the entire book in landscape. For starters, it started just because of that first poem, because there was no other way to write it. It had to be landscape.
Mm-hmm.
And then what I realized when I did that was I took up so much space on the page. And I was like, oh, look at this black text taking up white space. I just really wanted the encroachment of black text taking up white space as much as possible. And I realized it's easier to it, and this may sound weird when I say this, because technically you can do it either way, but it looks more menacing and it's easier to do when you have it on landscape because it feels like it's actually moving across the page. Where
Right.
the other way, it just feels like a regular written poem. So
Yeah.
allowed for large shapes. Technically, the essay on Yeet, the Calvino one, is it creates an island. Like that's supposed to be like islands. And I don't think I would have been able to do that. Actually, I know for a fact because I tried to do it the other way, that couldn't do it in that frame. Secondly, when I did this, the actual framing of the book, by turning it sideways, I'm already asking you to do something that is so radical, not turning the book sideways, right?
Mm.
That is unfortunately a radical thought process to at least half of America, not more, right? It's more. So with that being said, if you're willing to do the hard work of taking a book and flip it sideways and read it like a calendar, then you're probably
Hmm.
do the work to believe that Black people should exist. You've already done a hard thing.
Yeah, taking those small leaps in order to get us towards those bigger leaps in, unfortunately, imagination. But then for now, but hopefully that imagination will lead us somewhere, right? It all has to start in our imagine. We have to imagine a better world before we can build it. Um, but yeah, I think that's part of the reason why in my class I talked about your book during the line, the week we were talking about the line. As poets, I think sometimes we can get afraid of what the long line can do or ask of us, like the amount of space that it requires, especially once you flip it in landscape, right? There's even more of line to work with. And then what it asks of us, like for reading and also for writing, like to get to the end of that line and to make something that fills up the page is quite the endeavor. On a final note, the last thing that I'll ask is something that strikes me that I mentioned before about this collection is repetition, not just the title of poems, but also images like flowers and natural life is really big in this collection, or the repetition of language within particular poems. What is your own personal relationship to repetition? And even more generally, how did you go about engaging with form throughout the writing of YEET?
So one of the biggest things I learned in undergrad when I was doing the creative writing program, at that program I will not shout out, but I no shade, but I was taught anaphora. I remember this very specifically because my professor called it anaphora, and I was like, "Oh, it's anaphora. It got to be anaphora."
That is a drag name.
That is right, and that's not what I was gonna say.
Someone write that down.
Just anaphora. But yeah, and the idea that you can repeat something and it will change its wording or meaning. I often think of the repetition. Now I think of the repetition that's in There's Always This Year for Hanifa Durrakib's essay collection, like how or continually comes back to the word witness and how witness changes its shape and meaning depending on how it's placed into a specific anything or a specific phrasing. The reason I returned to this repetition was multiple different reasons, right? So, like the stacking of language made it look more like chaotic when I was talking about the Douglas Kearney poem. Whereas an Ode to Bear Milk, which love the party, awful name, I will continually say that. But the ands are actually just adding bodies to the actual crowd, right? So like now it feels like a club full of maybe 400, 500, 700 people. It's not, that club can't fit that, but like you don't know that because that's not
Mhm.
what it feels like when you're there, and it never feels endless, which is like why that repetition happened in that way. The flowers are all the Black people. Every time I name a flower, I'm actually talking about Black people, right? That is a choice, and if this is a Black collection, I need to keep bringing up these different type of flowers because there's different types of Black people. We're not
Mm.
all one uniform Black, right?
Yeah.
So like all of what I think of repetition is that if used correctly, it can alter, change, and enhance in any single poem because it could be used in so many various ways. I think when you're talking about like the hesitancy of stepping towards that, it's I don't want to say the same thing over and over again. And sometimes you have to. Have you
Yeah.
had a chance? Like,
Yeah. And some things bear repeating.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, that's how we got there. I was like, I'm gonna just keep saying these words over and we're gonna see if it works. And my MFA cohort was like, it worked. And I said, work.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the biggest things I think as poets we maybe sometimes learn as we go towards a project is you have to lean into things if you want to be seen. If you really want to push yourself, you have to lean into it, not out of it. Because that's how you get the work that really excites you. So for me, reading the book, the repetition just helped create that through line that I think it was aiming for. I love what you're saying about the flowers being different kinds of Black people. Because not only is it all different kinds of Black people, we're also all alive, right? When I think of flowers, I'm thinking of something that's alive and breathing and beautiful to look at wherever you are. And so I appreciate those being brought throughout the collection. I appreciate you. I appreciate your time on this podcast and everything you've said about the collection. I hope everyone goes out to read it. But to close this out, I would love if you could read one of your eponymous poems for us.
Of course I can. I'm going to read the final poem in the collection. And if I may, it's hard to talk about this poem or read this poem without just saying it's a small piece, which is the Simone White pieces. I got to see her perform some of her poems at the Guggenheim. And this actual scene at the end is something that basically really happened. If you see her on the street, don't talk to me. I'm not that nice. But if we're at a, you can ask me. Essays on YEET, a roadmap after Simone White. If you're wondering where we are, here the grass grows thistled and thorned, unconcerned by what could cause it harm, stupidly blooming everywhere it can touch, which is everywhere next to the mouth of a mothering creek. And yes, the creeks here bloom to wild daisy chain of water, lilying its way around the greening bark of old oaks, which are still blooming into a perfect orange. And I must have mentioned the apples here are so bright that even the crisp air takes sips from them. The tangerines bloom their sharpest during what you once knew as winter, but we know as nothing ever dies. We never run out of space. The land itself cracks a smile wide enough for us to build on its teeth. And yes, here too we dance, and the dance is an act of blooming, and there is no tomorrow or yesterday, only right now, and uncles licked in the mystique of a charcoal grill. And I must have mentioned the trees before, their vines tangled and thriving, their trunks wet with breathing, the small triangles of flush light peering through their leaves. It covers us in silk as we dance. Yes, this blooming is survival, a dance we continue even after our music drifts into the windbreaker whistle of the leaves, and we dance to our own silence, the jive break pop of our bodies collecting sweat in all of each other's movements. All as one, we dance circles around each other, a rotating hand of a bracket clock was freezing us in a swirled step where we can sound out the drop of the knees as they buckle from the soft age lent to us by sand, the dust clacking beneath our soles, our dreads, a gust of tambourines boom cacking to the silence. We are holding the blade in our fingers, excavating the joy and the lack of noise. Look how loud we've become in all of this space. We are soaked in felicity, our mouths clayed into silent laughter. We dance like black blood cells, suturing wounds, spiraling. Silence, listen, hear the joints crack out of place, the small step of praise, pressing joy into the dirt, a praise so holy, ghost, that we perform to this trap beat, a praise so grotesque that we come out unbloodied, our snarls and yips piercing the night, a praise of blooming bodies hollering into the dark, a praise only the dead could create. Could you imagine a place loving us for being alive? I must admit, this isn't a map for you to find us. Rather, to know we made it safe. There's so much green in the palms of our planet that is starting to hue the sky. If I take a deep enough breath, my lungs will bloom wild orchids, their stems hugging my arteries. It's become so difficult to say beautiful and not mean alive.
Thank you all for listening to this episode of Eponymous. a series of the Old Word podcast produced by me, Diesel Carson. The music for Eponymous and Old Word is provided by Esoteric Creations. Check them out on Spotify. Old Word will be going on a summer break to rest and prepare for new episodes to drop in the fall. Until next time, keep reading, keep writing, and thanks for listening.